He'd sung for presidents, kings, and millions around the world. But nothing prepared him for this. On a humid night in Memphis, 1976, Elvis looked into the crowd and saw a face he hadn't seen since the divorce. The tiny girl who still called him Daddy. What happened next stopped the show cold. June 10, 1976. Memphis, Tennessee. The Mid-South Coliseum pulsed like a living heart. 18,000 people filled the seats, waving scarves, cameras, and homemade signs that shimmered under the lights. You could almost taste the electricity in the air, half sweat, half perfume, and pure anticipation. Backstage, Elvis adjusted the gold belt around his white jumpsuit. Joe Esposito, his road manager, gave him a quick nod. Crowds wild tonight, Elvis smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. He'd done this 1,000 times, yet something in him felt off, like the music had lost a piece of its soul. The house lights dimmed. The first chords of C.C. Rider exploded through the speakers. The roar was deafening. Fans screamed his name as he walked into the spotlight, the rhinestones on his suit throwing sparks across the smoke-filled air. For 90 minutes he was flawless. Burning Love, Suspicious Minds, each song louder than the last. The crowd belonged to him completely. Then came the moment every fan waited for, the gentle start of Can't Help Falling in Love. It was the song that ended every show, the one people whispered they wanted to hear before they died. Elvis tilted his head toward the microphone. Wise men say. His voice rolled like honey through the hall. That's when it happened. Through the blinding white of the stage lights, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Front row, fourth seat from center. A small girl in a pink dress clutching a teddy bear almost bigger than her. The light hit her face just long enough for him to see it. Brown eyes, soft smile. Lisa Marie. For a heartbeat, Elvis forgot to breathe. The lyric hung unfinished in his throat. The band, still playing, glanced toward him in confusion. He tried again, but the next line wouldn't come. It was as if the air itself had turned heavy. He looked again to make sure he wasn't imagining it. No mistake. It was her. His little girl, the one he'd kissed goodbye 6 months earlier in Los Angeles. The one he wrote letters to but could never quite reach. The microphone picked up his uneven breathing. A few people in the crowd laughed softly, thinking he was joking. But the band knew better. Glenn Hardin at the piano slowed the tempo, eyes searching for a signal. None came. Elvis swallowed hard. The next words refused to form. He turned slightly, his hand shaking as he wiped his face. The spotlight shimmered off the moisture in his eyes. From the wings, Colonel Parker frowned, whispering to a stagehand, "What's wrong with him?" Joe Esposito leaned forward. He saw something, someone. The arena's energy shifted. Where there had been chaos and cheers, there was now a strange stillness. People leaned forward, sensing they were about to witness something rare, something not rehearsed. Elvis stepped away from the mic. The orchestra's final note faded into the silence. All you could hear was the hum of the amplifiers and the distant click of camera shutters. He looked down at Lisa Marie again. She was smiling, waving that little bear like it was a flag. And in that instant, the king of rock and roll felt smaller than he'd ever felt in his life. His lips moved. Barely a whisper the microphone still caught. Lisa! The audience didn't understand. But every parent in that room suddenly felt something deep in their chest. The superstar they had come to worship was no longer performing. He was remembering. For a long moment Elvis just stood there, lost between the man he used to be and the father he still wanted to become. The crowd waited, holding its breath. Would he start singing again? Or would the king walk off his own stage? Have you ever seen a hero forget the words that made him famous? For a few endless seconds, Elvis stood frozen under the white-hot lights. The crowd still clapped politely, unsure what they were seeing. Then, with a trembling breath, he leaned toward the microphone. "Well, I'll be—" His voice cracked. The sound rippled through the arena like a dropped glass. The laughter stopped. Cameras clicked. Fans craned their necks, trying to see what had startled him. In the front row, Lisa Marie waved shyly, her small hand barely visible above the rail. She was only 8 years old but carried herself with a kind of quiet confidence that came straight from her father. She didn't understand the weight of that moment. But Elvis did. He hadn't seen his daughter in half a year. Since the divorce, most of her days were spent in Los Angeles with Priscilla. Swimming lessons, piano practice, school events. Elvis knew every schedule by heart, even if he wasn't there. He called often, sent gifts, tiny necklaces, handwritten notes, toy guitars. But each one felt like an apology wrapped in tissue paper. Now here she was, right in front of him, watching him perform like one of his fans. And something inside him broke. The audience could feel it too. They weren't sure what was happening, but they sensed it wasn't part of the act. Colonel Parker, standing in the wings, muttered to Joe Esposito, "Who let her in here?" Joe shook his head. "Wasn't me, Colonel. Guess the universe did." Up on stage, Elvis tried to steady himself. He forced a smile and motioned for the band to keep playing, but the moment was already gone. The rhythm, the swagger, the showmanship, all of it had slipped through his fingers. He stared at Lisa again. Every song, every headline, every lonely hotel room seemed to crash over him at once. The cost of the crown, staring him in the face. She mouthed something he couldn't hear. He took a step closer to the edge of the stage. Her lips moved again. He read the words clearly this time. Daddy. It hit him like thunder. The orchestra faltered. Glenn Hardin's hands hovered above the keys, waiting for a cue that never came. The brass section lowered their instruments. The drummer's sticks stopped midair. 18,000 people fell silent. The spotlight felt too bright now. It wasn't illuminating him, it was exposing him. The sequins on his jumpsuit shimmered like armor cracking apart. He looked down, eyes wet, and whispered into the microphone, "That's my little girl." The crowd erupted in cheers and gasps. Flashbulbs popped like fireworks. But Elvis wasn't smiling. He was overwhelmed. He'd spent years being the king of rock and roll. Now, in front of all these strangers, he just wanted to be a father again. Lisa smiled wider, holding the teddy bear to her chest. A scarf was tied around its neck, one of his blue ones. Someone must have given it to her backstage. Elvis swallowed hard. "How'd you sneak in here, little bit?" He muttered under his breath, half to himself. He could see Joe Esposito motioning from the side curtain. "You okay?" Elvis nodded faintly, though it was a lie. Inside, memories flooded him. Lisa running down the Graceland hallway with pigtails flying. Her laughter echoing off the marble floors. Her hand clutching his as they watched Saturday morning cartoons together before he left for another tour. That was before the headlines, before the empty hotel suites, before his own walls became higher than the stage. He blinked hard, trying to keep his voice steady. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said softly, "I think I just got surprised by the most beautiful girl in the world." The audience cheered, but it wasn't wild. It was warm, gentle applause that felt more like a prayer than noise. Elvis looked down at Lisa again. "You came all the way from California just to see your old man?" She nodded, her grin bright and innocent. From behind him, the orchestra waited. Colonel Parker crossed his arms, whispering angrily to a stagehand. But Elvis didn't care. For once, the show could wait. He leaned closer to the mic, voice trembling. "You know, sometimes you think you've got everything you ever wanted. Then a little hand waves at you, and you realize what you've been missing." People began wiping tears. The giant screens showed his face up close. Eyes glistening, lips quivering, every emotion raw and visible. Elvis took a deep breath, forcing a shaky laugh. "Well, folks," he said, "guess the king just got dethroned by a princess." The crowd roared with laughter and applause again. But underneath the humor, everyone could feel the ache in his voice. He looked at Lisa one last time, then whispered to himself, "Let's see if I can finish this song." But deep down, he already knew. Tonight, the music wasn't in the notes. It was in her eyes. And the next line he tried to sing never made it out. For a moment, it looked like Elvis might recover. He straightened up, adjusted the microphone, and nodded at Glenn Hardin to start again. The familiar chords of Can't Help Falling in Love echoed through the arena. Wise men say. The words trembled out, half voice, half memory. The melody wavered, then broke. Silence. Elvis stared down at the crowd, eyes unfocused, as if he were trying to remember where he was. The brass section hesitated, waiting for the cue. It never came. The sound of 18,000 people breathing in the dark replaced the music. He tried again, softer this time. Only fools rush in. Nothing. His throat closed. The band stopped entirely. The king of rock and roll speechless. For the first time in his life, Elvis Presley could not sing. From the edge of the stage, Joe Esposito stepped forward, concern written all over his face. Colonel Parker shook his head, whispering sharply, "Tell him to finish the damn song." But Joe didn't move. He knew something sacred was happening, something no one should interrupt. Elvis ran his hand through his hair, eyes glistening in the spotlights. He took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry, folks," he said quietly. I need a minute." No one booed. No one even stirred. The man who had filled coliseums with sound now commanded complete silence. Then, in that stillness, a sound rose, soft but clear. "You can, Daddy." The voice came from the front row. Lisa Marie stood on her seat, teddy bear in one hand, waving the other like she was cheering at a school play. Gasps rippled through the audience. Elvis froze. That tiny voice pierced deeper than any note he had ever sung. He turned toward her, tears beginning to form. She smiled, and the entire hall seemed to breathe again. Every camera flashed at once. The flashes painted the moment into memory. The superstar and the child, frozen in light and love. He stepped to the edge of the stage, one knee bending, his jeweled cape brushing the floor. "Hey, sweetheart," he whispered into the microphone. "You cheering for me?" Lisa nodded eagerly. "Sing, Daddy." That broke him. Elvis pressed his lips together, trying to stop the sob that rose in his throat. He covered his face with one hand. The crowd saw the tremor in his shoulders. Then came the sound no one expected, the sound of the king crying. He wasn't the performer anymore. He was a father who'd missed too many birthdays, too many nights reading bedtime stories. The audience didn't know what to do. Some cried with him. Others clutched their chests. The room had turned from concert to confessional. Glenn Harden looked toward the wings, but Elvis lifted a hand. "Don't." He stood again, wiping his face, breathing hard. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice shaking. "I think I just got reminded what really matters." Applause thundered. But it wasn't the wild kind, it was soft, almost reverent. He turned back to Lisa and smiled. "You want to help Daddy finish this one?" Her head tilted. "Can I?" "You already are." He laughed through his tears and gestured for the band to stay silent. "Hold it, boys," he said. "No music. Just me and her." He started humming. It wasn't perfect. His voice cracked on every other note. But it didn't matter. Lisa hummed too, her tiny voice carrying through the hall. The crowd leaned in, listening to a duet that no one would ever forget. 18,000 people in Memphis witnessed the king stripped bare. No bravado, no showmanship, just love. Behind the curtain, Colonel Parker muttered, "He's off the rails." Joe Esposito whispered back, "No, Colonel. For once, he's on track." Elvis reached into the pocket of his jumpsuit and pulled out a silk scarf. He wiped his tears with it, then held it up. The lights caught the blue fabric, turning it almost silver. He smiled and tossed it gently toward Lisa. She caught it, holding it tight against her chest. The audience erupted. Then came another short silence, thick, holy, unforgettable. Elvis leaned toward the microphone, his voice a whisper that filled every corner of the Coliseum. "Sometimes," he said, "the hardest songs are the ones you don't finish." The audience rose to their feet. People clapped, cried, shouted his name. Even the band stood, heads bowed slightly. Lisa blew him a kiss. He caught it, pretending to put it in his pocket. The crowd laughed through their tears. Elvis straightened up, regaining his composure, but his eyes stayed soft. "Thank you, honey," he whispered. For a second, he looked like the man from 20 years ago, the young boy from Tupelo who just wanted to sing for his mama. He glanced once more at Lisa, then looked out at the sea of faces, every one of them reflecting back the same emotion. Compassion. He exhaled, voice trembling. Guess that's enough for now. And the king, for the first time, didn't end his show with a song. He ended it with silence. That silence said everything words couldn't. What would you have done, standing there, when the world watched you break? But your child told you to keep going. As Elvis left the stage, the applause followed him like a wave, but he didn't turn around. He was holding something more powerful than fame that night. His daughter's voice echoing in his heart. And from that moment, every song he sang after would mean something different. Something true. Backstage, chaos simmered behind the curtains. Crew members whispered into headsets, Colonel Parker paced, and the orchestra waited for orders that never came. But out front, the lights stayed dim. The crowd didn't move. Everyone sensed the night wasn't finished yet. Then the curtain rustled, and Elvis stepped back into the light. He wasn't smiling. His hair was damp, collar loose, the glittering cape hanging heavy across his shoulders. He walked slowly to the microphone and looked straight into the front row. There's someone special here tonight, he said, his voice still trembling. My little girl. The spotlight drifted until it found Lisa Marie. She froze for half a second, then waved shyly. The arena erupted. Applause that felt like thunder wrapped in love. Elvis nodded, tears glinting. She's the reason I'm standing again. He untied the blue silk scarf from his neck, the one fans fought for at every show, and tossed it gently toward her. It fluttered like a feather before landing in her hands. She pressed it to her face, beaming. The audience melted. Even the toughest men in the upper rows wiped their eyes. Elvis turned to his band and lifted one hand. Hold it, boys, he said softly. This one ain't on the set list. The room went still. A single spotlight, the quiet hum of amplifiers, the faint squeal of feedback. He sat at the piano, the bench creaking under his weight. Fingers hovered above the keys, uncertain. He glanced once more at Lisa. This is for you, baby. The first notes of Love Me Tender floated into the silence. Slow, fragile, almost broken. Every sound in the hall faded except that voice, low and trembling but filled with something deeper than perfection. Truth. Love me tender. Love me sweet. The crowd barely breathed. People held hands, afraid to interrupt. Halfway through the verse, Elvis's voice cracked. He laughed under his breath. Guess Daddy's a little rusty, he whispered. Lisa giggled, that small ringing sound carrying through the hush. And then she began to hum, soft, clear, innocent. The microphone caught it. 18,000 people heard the king of rock and roll and his 8-year-old daughter singing together. No instruments now, just two voices. One seasoned by fame and regret, the other untouched by either. The audience joined in, quietly at first, like a congregation afraid to disturb a prayer. Row by row, section by section, the song spread until the whole Coliseum became a single choir. Never let me go. Elvis looked up from the keys, overwhelmed. His lower lip quivered. He'd sung to presidents, queens, and sold-out arenas, but this was the first time he felt he was singing for the right reason. He finished the verse and let the final chord linger. The silence afterward felt holy. He exhaled shakily and spoke into the microphone. You know, he said, voice raw, you spend your life chasing applause, but nothing beats hearing your own child sing with you. A long pause, then applause surged again. Gentle, rhythmic, unending. Lisa smiled so wide her cheeks flushed pink. She lifted the scarf to her heart. Elvis smiled back, the kind of smile people hadn't seen from him in years. Free of the mask, free of the pain. He stood from the piano, walked to the edge of the stage, and bowed slightly. Thank you, Memphis, he whispered. And thank you, sweetheart. As he turned to leave, the crowd began chanting his name. Not like fans calling for an encore, but like friends sending him strength. He stopped halfway, looked back over his shoulder, and said one last thing that no microphone could hide. "I love you, Lisa." Lisa's little voice answered, "I love you too, Daddy." That echo filled the arena louder than any amplifier ever could. Elvis pressed a hand to his chest. His lips trembled, but he was smiling through the tears. The lights dimmed, the curtain fell, and the sound of 18,000 hearts beating as one followed him off stage. Outside, people would later say the air felt different that night, like something invisible had shifted, because for the first time in years, Elvis Presley had stopped being a legend and started being a father again. Can love really make even a king kneel? Backstage smelled of sweat, roses, and electricity. Elvis walked off the stage still shaking, scarf gone, makeup streaked. Crew members stepped aside like he was carrying something sacred. The roar of the crowd still thundered through the concrete halls, fading into a heartbeat-like hum. Joe Esposito handed him a towel. "You all right, E?" Elvis nodded slowly. "Never better, and never worse." He sank onto a folding chair, chest rising fast. For years, applause had been his oxygen. Tonight it felt different, too real, too heavy. Then he heard it, tiny footsteps on the dressing room floor. Lisa Marie, still clutching the teddy bear, peeked around the doorway. Her eyes were wide, nervous. Elvis smiled, the exhaustion melting from his face. "Come here, little bit." She ran into his arms. He lifted her, hugging her so tightly the bear squeaked between them. "You were amazing out there," he whispered. "You saved your old man." She giggled. "You were crying." He laughed softly. "Yeah, I do that sometimes when angels start singing." Colonel Parker stood at the door, hat in hand, unsure whether to interrupt. Joe waved him off. "Give them a minute." Elvis sat down, Lisa still on his lap. The makeup girl quietly handed him a tissue. He dabbed Lisa's cheek where glitter from his suit had rubbed off. "Daddy?" she asked. "Why did everybody stop?" He looked at her, eyes full of regret. "Because I forgot the words, baby. I was looking at you and forgot everything else." "That's okay," she said simply. "You can sing them next time." That line hit him harder than any critic ever could. Next time. She believed there would be one. He swallowed. "Yeah, next time." From the table beside him, he took off his golden TCB necklace, the lightning bolt that meant taking care of business. He placed it around her neck. It hung almost to her waist. "I want you to keep this," he said. Her eyes lit up. "But that's yours." "Not anymore. When you wear it, it means Daddy's with you, even when he's not on stage." He pulled out a notepad and scribbled a few lines in his slanted handwriting. "Wherever you go, I'll be singing for you." He folded the page and tucked it into the teddy bear's paw. She looked up, smiling. "Promise." Elvis met her gaze, voice barely a whisper. "Cross my heart." Joe Esposito later said he'd never seen Elvis look so human, so light. The weight of fame seemed to slide right off him. When it was time for Lisa to leave, Elvis walked her to the car waiting outside the Coliseum. Fans still lingered in the parking lot, waving flashbulbs and signs, but he didn't see them. He only saw her. He crouched beside the open door. "You be good for your mama, you hear?" "I will," she said. Then, after a pause, "Will you sing for me tomorrow?" He smiled. "Every night, baby. Just listen for me." She leaned out and kissed his cheek. "Good night, Daddy." As the car pulled away, Elvis stood under the buzzing streetlight, watching the taillights disappear into the Memphis night. The scarf was gone, the show was over, but the promise was real. From that night on, every concert ended the same way. When he sang "Love Me Tender," he'd glance toward the crowd and say softly, "This one's for my little girl, watching somewhere out there." People thought it was part of the act. Only a few knew the truth, that each word was a message sent across the miles, a promise kept in music. Sometimes the greatest encore isn't on a stage. It's the quiet vow whispered between a father and his child. Have you ever realized too late that the audience that matters most is only one person wide? After the concert, word spread like wildfire through Memphis. People said the king had cried on stage. Others swore they saw him kneel to a child in the front row. The newspapers the next morning printed a headline that summed it all up: Elvis stops the show for love. But for Elvis, the story didn't end there. Back at Graceland, the stage lights were replaced by the soft glow of a night lamp in Lisa's empty room. Her teddy bear sat on the bed, scarf around its neck, waiting. The silence inside the mansion felt different, peaceful, almost holy. Joe Esposito later said that night changed Elvis completely. He wasn't chasing applause anymore, Joe told reporters. He was chasing meaning. In the months that followed, people noticed small changes in his shows. The jumpsuits grew simpler, the songs slower, more tender. Between numbers, he started talking to the audience like old friends instead of fans. "You never know who's out there," he'd say. "Maybe somebody who needs to be reminded they're loved." Every performance ended the same way, with "Love Me Tender" and a quiet dedication. "This one's for my little girl, watching somewhere out there." Bootleggers captured those finales on tape. One rare copy, labeled "The Father's Song," still circulates among collectors today, its faint hiss carrying the sound of a promise echoing through time. After Elvis passed in 1977, people combed through his possessions at Graceland. Rings, scarves, letters, but one discovery stopped them cold. Inside a glass case near his piano lay Lisa's teddy bear, perfectly preserved. In its paw was a folded piece of paper, yellowed at the edges. "Wherever you go, I'll be singing for you." Lisa Marie kept that note and the blue scarf for the rest of her life. In interviews years later, her voice would soften whenever someone mentioned that night. "That was when I met my dad," she'd say. "Not the superstar, just the man who loved me." Decades passed. The Mid-South Coliseum aged, the seats replaced, the paint faded. But every Father's Day, fans still gathered by the front doors with teddy bears and blue scarves. A bronze plaque stands there now, small but gleaming beneath the floodlights. June 10, 1976, the night Elvis Presley stopped the show for love. Tour guides pointed out during concerts at the newer FedEx Forum. Musicians touch it before walking on stage, whispering, "For the king and his girl." Some legends are built on fame. Others are built on moments like that, a father remembering what the music was for. When people listen to the recordings from that tour, they hear something subtle under the notes, a gentleness that wasn't there before. The same man who once roared through burning love now lingered on the quiet lines, as if singing to someone only he could see. Joe Esposito summed it up best years later. "That little girl gave him back his heart," he said. And once he got it back, every song changed. The story of that night still circles the world, told in documentaries, podcasts, and whispered by fans in line outside Graceland. Some say they can feel it in the air near the Coliseum, that same hush that fell when Lisa's voice first broke the silence. Maybe that's what true legacy sounds like. Not a roar, but a whisper that never fades. Because long after the spotlight dimmed, long after the curtain fell, the king kept his promise. He's still singing for her, somewhere between the echo of applause and the beat of a father's heart. And maybe that's what real love does. It doesn't end. It just keeps playing. Some stories end with applause. Others end with silence that still echoes decades later. Elvis didn't just sing that night. He reminded the world what love sounds like. If the story moved you, share it with someone who's ever missed a loved one. Because sometimes the greatest performances aren't sung for crowds. They're sung for family.